Pop Culture Pastor.
Do you do the advent calendars, Cody?
No.
No.
That's no.
Well, why'd you say it weird?
Because,
Did you do them when you were a kid?
No.
Did your family do them?
No.
Why not? Why you have such an adverse reaction to advent calendars?
Because it wasn't, I didn't know anyone that did it.
Oh, we did it. We didn't even go to church when I was a kid.
We didn't go to church when I was a little kid. And then by the time we do go to church, I'm 13. And so, it wasn't a thing. And my sister doesn't do it. My parents don't do it for the grandkids. No.
I got my kids a Funko advent calendar that has a little Marvel themed Christmas Funko in every spot. So we've started doing that. You get a little collectible figure.
My advent calendar, if I was to do one, and I saw it online, would be the Die Hard one where Hans is falling down.
He's falling down Nakatomi Plaza.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, it really, the Funko advent calendar, the Marvel Funko, it really has nothing to do with Jesus. So we make our 4-year-old, we ask him every day before we do it. Now, what's Christmas about? And sometimes it takes him a few tries. He's like, presents. No. Christmas trees. No. And then he'll get to Jesus.
Candy canes.
But we enjoy the advent calendar. Well, Cody, sometimes we like to talk about science.
Science.
We do. She blinded me with science.
Such a fun song.
We get blinded with science sometimes. I think one of my favorite things about science comes from a Jurassic Park quote. And science is guilty of this from sometimes. But Jeff Goldblum's character in Dr. Ian Malcolm in Jurassic Park, he said, "You were so consumed with whether you could, you didn't stop and think if you should."
Oh, burn.
And I think we have another one of those things coming up with science here. Last month, the White House announced a 5-year research plan to study geoengineering. Now, are you familiar with the term solar geoengineering?
No.
Okay. This is wild.
Okay.
The idea of solar geoengineering, or it's basically shooting particles into the stratosphere to reduce the warming of the sun. Okay, so here's the idea. The idea is, for people that believe this, climate change is out of control. The warming of the earth is getting bad. So as a last resort, we're going to shoot particles of something into our own atmosphere to block the sun, to literally dim the sun's effect on the planet Earth. Cody, what do you think about that idea? You think that's a good idea?
So, initial thoughts are things tend to be cyclical. We have these cycles.
There's already armchair scientists yelling at you from their listening standpoints.
But B, so I have 3. B, it sounds feasible. And then C, I don't know if you should do it.
Let's start with the problem. The problem is climate change. And that is something that is alleged. Okay. Now, not the part that climate changes. No, that happens. The alleged part is whether it is an abnormal part of the cyclical, changing of climate. Here's the problem. There's no control group in this scientific experiment of observations because the Earth's climate has always changed over time, regardless of what we do.
Yeah. I mean, we had when was it? The late 1700s into the 1800s? Like a mini ice age in parts of the world, like
Yeah.
very many. But like literally things change, and if let's say we lessen the effects of the sun and then like a huge volcano goes off and blocks out the sun naturally as is, maybe we would have appreciated being a little bit warmer than we were to begin with.
Yeah. So the little ice age you're talking about was actually caused by the eruption of Krakatoa, one of the largest volcanic eruptions in recorded history. And they said it snowed in England in July that year.
Ew.
Yeah. I mean, and it like kind of sent the world into a pretty bad couple years because of the damage of crops, food production, things like that. And so, but those historically have been the largest changers of climate. When we see extreme change, it's always by like
Asteroid.
a huge volcanic eruption, an asteroid impact, where we can like look through the data back then. We can look at, geology, stratification, and we can figure out, man, this was a bad few years for them because this asteroid hit, put all that stuff up in the atmosphere, it blocked out the sun, and sort of, yeah, like, and we don't, like, here's the problem. We don't know when that'll happen.
We don't.
So you bring up a good point of like, what if we're dimming the sun ourselves to try and stop quote unquote global warming, and then a volcano eruption happens out in the Pacific?
Or is it Yellowstone that's a huge volcano that could erupt at any moment?
Yellowstone's a super volcano that is they try to make like, well, it erupts once every 186,000 years.
And you never know when this is going to be the 186,000th year.
And it's been more than 186,000 years since his last eruption. But all of that is according to the observable things we can try to figure out.
Yeah.
So you don't know like whether any of that makes sense or whatever. It's just our best guess, which is kind of the problem with all of this is it's our best guess. And now we want to make a solution to something that might not actually be a problem. Like, you got to be sure there's a problem first.
You do.
We'll be back. Like, everyone out there I know, when I say we're not even sure there's a problem, is like mad at me, like, Dave, climate change is real. And again, I'm going to say, like, I know it's real, but you don't know okay, here's the problem. Whenever we have a problem now, we always try to find the singular bad guy, right? We're very much hero-villain oriented. And the problem is when we see the world in black and white, we see a world that doesn't exist because, first of all, everything's a complex system. There's much more nuance than we try to pretend there isn't. And the reason we pretend there isn't nuance is because it makes everything simpler. So when we see climate change, which is a real thing, and we see that some communities that are islands out in the world and their sea levels rising a bit, we tend to go to like, well, there's an evil culprit, but there's kind of not. Here's the problem. We just said earlier this morning that one of the largest producers of methane is cows.
Yeah.
So if that's the problem, then why are we trying to get all this clean energy?
Mm-hmm.
And if clean energy is the problem, then why are we getting all these electric cars? Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, there's all these issues. It's a complex situation. And if it's all adding to the amount of these gases in the atmosphere, then are you just going to kill off all the cows? I mean, what do you do? No, actually, it's just this one thing, and we need to dim the sun. You see where I'm going with this?
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that we can do that we think will be a macro solver. But here's what you're not thinking of. When we dim the sun, if this is something we can really do, which scientists seem to think we can, by shooting particles into our atmosphere, we're not literally affecting the sun. We're affecting how much the sun gets to us. Here's the problem. It's already proven, like any ecosystem scientist could tell you this, like a biologist. You change the temperature by a half degree and you will change an ecosystem.
Significantly.
And if you thought the degree we've gone up in the last 150 years by average changed ecosystems, and you don't think that by changing it back artificially won't change more, then you're fooling yourself. You're still making an artificial change to the natural order.
Yeah. And I mean, literally, there's natural things that happen that kind of help correct a lot of change that humanity or animals cause. I mean, you get droughts, you get tornadoes, you get monsoons, you get forest fires. I mean, literally, all these things just happen naturally and kind of help with the resetting of where we're at. And so, again, I'm more hesitant. I know that we can also like shoot up particles that can help cause rain in like dry areas and stuff. And it's like, I don't know if you want to do that either, because it's going to affect on down the road.
Yeah. Here's the problem with that. You don't get to control how much rain the environment whips up. So you change the temperature by half a degree or a degree, and some places that aren't used to getting rain might get a lot of rain, like a lot of rain, and flooding might happen in places that don't usually flood. Then what? Like every little small change you make, it's like what was that movie? The Butterfly Effect?
Yeah.
Like every little change you make, like in a sense, the climate is really that delicate. Ecosystems are really that delicate. And if I'm like PETA, I'm against this idea. I'm like, no, you can't do that. You're liable to kill off whole species just by doing that, trying to do something you think's a good thing.
So I don't remember what this documentary was. I want to say it was on Netflix. Will Smith narrated it. I don't remember if it was Planet Earth or something along those lines, but he, like, the first episode talks about like this barren, salty desert in the middle of Africa, and like wind blowing up all this sand and debris. And it actually is like tons and tons of dead remains of ancient sea creatures that died there when it was underwater. And like it getting blown around the world helps. When it rains, it creates more nutrient rich soil in like the Amazon. And it's like, oh, so all this stuff actually works for the benefit of everything else.
Yeah, pretty much anything that's ever been alive and is decomposed turns into all these resources that we need. Oil, like that's basically what oil is like old life that is decomposed. That, I mean, it's interesting how all that works, that there's like this, not only an ecosystem of life, like on the surface, but it appears that the earth itself is alive sometimes. You know what I mean? Like the whole earth is like it's this ecosystem. And it's interesting when you look at it like that, because then, you know, you start leaning towards this intelligent design of like, oh, by the way, everything in creation tends to be this mathematical equation where if you move the dial, you know, we're talking millimeters, just little bits here, then like you go from a full lush life-giving earth. Like if you move the earth on its orbit just a little bit, then it goes from that to nothing. Nothing could survive here. And when you see creation as this very exact thing, then you'll start to see that like, hey, we probably shouldn't meddle with that.
Yeah.
So scientists have this idea of shooting particles into our atmosphere to block the sun's rays. Like it's almost like an artificial more minor volcanic eruption, right?
Yeah.
Because that's where they learned about the like, hey, I wonder if we could do that and control it. Now, here's the problem. There's no governing authority for it. So if they find the technology to do that, any country could just do that without checking it over with other countries. And like, so say Spain, I'm just grabbing countries out of thin air because I wanted one close to the equator. Spain says, hey, you know what? It's too hot here. Climate change is really, kicking us in when we're down, and we need to change something. So they have the technology to shoot something into the atmosphere to block some of the sun's rays, but they can't really control it because it just goes into the atmosphere, right? Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, it makes it, 5 degrees cooler in Spain, but it also makes it 5 degrees cooler in Norway, which turns out is too cold. And all of a sudden, all the people living there can't grow crops because of what Spain did. You see what I'm saying? Like there's no controls for it.
Oh, yeah. In which there are already governing bodies that you question their bioethics to begin with, and their humanity for other nations that aren't them. And so, yeah, this technology could be catastrophic.
Yeah. And it's interesting because this is a contentious issue, and like they're trying to combat climate change, which you think would give them natural allies over on that progressive side. But there has been an instance where there was a group of scientists who had it ready to go and were actively attempting to try the idea out. And it was shut down with activist groups writing letters to the UN that Greta Thunberg even signed. So you have people who are climate change people who are like, don't do this.
I was going to say, I wonder what Greta's opinion of this is. And now I know.
Yeah. So it's interesting because it's causing different divisions, right? Like even some people, well, I was glad that some of those people were on that side because it tells me they're using logic. They're saying, hey, we've already manipulated the natural workings of the earth, allegedly, right? Mm-hmm. By putting so much chemicals and whatever into the atmosphere. Let's not keep manipulating. It stands to reason that we'll just make it worse.
Yeah. And there are entities, bigger companies that are trying to have a zero carbon footprint and have plans to shift to that, in which if there's some big polluters out there that are moving that direction, then it seems to be reasonable that within a relative short time frame for the planet Earth that, it would go back to the way it was 50 years ago or 100 years ago. Or
my personal idea is, which is, influenced by my faith, is that there is nothing we can really do that could really like kill the earth. God could make things go away. But I think as humans, we're being a little egotistical to think that we could greatly affect the goings on of the planet. I think it's just that's our own egotistical nature, our hubris to think that we could do something that would greatly damage the earth. I think we can change things, which I think it's possible we're seeing. But I don't think. I think the level of effect we could have is what I disagree with, mainly.
Just try to be good stewards of the earth and of the resources you have.
We are called to be good stewards, and so I agree with like trying to lessen our effects on the environment. Like, hey, we should be aware of what we do to the environment. That should be a thing we do. Anyways, it's interesting stuff. Keep the term solar geoengineering on your radar. If you see that, check it out because it's interesting what they're trying to theorize here. All right, welcome back. Pop Culture Pastor Radio Show. Dave and Cody here. Cody, you ever played Fortnite?
No, I've had like a million kids on my caseload that have.
Yeah, I tried to watch someone playing Fortnite, kind of made me ill. It's, that first person stuff, and if it moves too fast, it sets off my motion sickness. And I just can't do it.
Yeah.
And so something like, is there something about it if it's herky jerky too? Because I can play like Rocket League.
Oh yeah.
And that doesn't bother me. But for some reason, man, I couldn't even watch Fortnite. It's just blah. But apparently lots of youngsters don't have that problem. I'm looking at a story here. A group of Canadian parents are suing US-based Epic Games over its massive Fortnite franchise, according to Deadline, claiming it makes children into gaming addicts who stop eating, sleeping, and showering. I mean, my kids normally don't sleep and shower anyway, so two of them.
Yeah, like I would add to the list of like it makes them do weird dances and movements in real life.
I would say if they stop eating, that's a bad sign, because my kids haven't done that, unfortunately, because they cost a lot of money. Eat me out of house and home. But yeah, the BBC News was reporting a Canadian Supreme Court judge has now authorized the lawsuit filed against Fortnite's Epic Games by Quebec parents. And they claim that their gamers are severely dependent on the first-person shooter game, which has a worldwide audience of more than 80 million players.
I would also venture to say, should you sue yourselves?
Well, I mean, okay, as a parent whose kids love video games, this is a really hard thing to do because once the technology becomes so, it's like having this discussion with adults and smartphones, right?
Yeah.
How do you get rid of the smartphone at this point? Like without some sort of, like someone snapping their fingers. It's like Pandora's box. So if just getting rid of all technology is not an option, we've got to learn to live with it, right?
Yeah.
But the option is what? Moving your children out into the woods to live in a cabin? Like where you can raise them that way outside of the world, and then you release them out into the world and they hate you for the rest of their lives.
You will learn to live off the grid and you will love it.
Yeah, and then they hate you for the rest of their lives, right? Like,
but
there's got to be a way.
I mean, there's also like setting limits and boundaries. Mm-hmm. Growing up, I had a Nintendo 64, and if my mom would have let me, I would have played on it all day and all night.
Right.
But my mom was like, you get 30 minutes to play this, and then you have to go outside for an hour. Yeah. Well, and like she kicked me out, and then like I discovered my love of basketball was still there, and so I kept playing basketball, or I'd ride my bike, or
incidentally, Cody, a much better video game player than basketball player.
This is true, though. Coordination happened or didn't happen.
Did we just give up on parental control? What is it we don't like? Because here's this thing is like when we tell my oldest son to stop playing video games, he's 10. Wait a minute. He might be a little older than that. I'm a little fuzzy. I got 4 of them. I don't know when their birthdays are. I know when their birthdays are. I just don't know the year on all of them. I know he's my second oldest child. He's like 11 maybe. When we tell him to stop playing video games, that can result in a temper tantrum.
Oh yeah.
It can result in a blow up. But I know when we take away the video games for a certain amount of time, it doesn't take long for him to get over it and just get into other things. Like, so what I'm saying is like, yeah, you have to weather a little storm.
You do. And there's some kids, especially, I think kids that are legitimately addicted to video games, kids that might be on the spectrum, or a few other things that as a parent, you kind of have to tell them, hey, 10 minutes and then the game has to go off for X amount of time. And you can set a timer, and it can be a thing that, okay, I got to turn it off and get to a save spot and we're good.
Yeah.
Which, holy cow, like all the games now, besides like the ones that you're playing against people, like Fortnite, you can save.
Yeah.
Where like on the 64, I could not save every game.
Yeah, the good thing about games like Fortnite, Rocket League, where you're playing against other people, is generally a shorter game. You're talking 10 to 15 minutes to complete one game, one thing. So it's easy to be able to say, hey, after this game, let's take a break.
Yeah.
And yeah, that makes it okay. But we'll talk about this some more when we come back. Now, Cody, you bring up an interesting point. You bring up an interesting topic because you said kids that are on the spectrum. Mm-hmm. And now we live in a time where more and more kids are like, first of all, let's get your opinion on something. And this is just an opinion. This is not like professional thing.
Okay.
Do we have more kids on the spectrum now, or is it just we couldn't identify it before? Like, which do you think is, or is it both?
Honestly, opinion, not an expert.
Right. Of course.
I feel that it's a combination of both. That there are some people, like in the 80s and 90s and probably before then, that if we had this diagnoses and had testing readily available and knew some of the best practices, it would have helped them out a lot as kids. Mm-hmm. But I do think that there seems to be a growth of just volume as well. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's a combo. It's a combo in my mind.
Yeah. So I asked that because like, I want to stop and also concede that like, hey, this is difficult because for kids that are on the spectrum, a screen might be the one thing that's going to calm them down in the moment.
Yeah.
And as a parent, like I can identify with the parent who's stretched thin, who's doing everything they can to love their kid and says, okay, I need a break too. So here's a screen. And then like, so I can see how this can become an addicting thing for the kid or even for the parent to get a break.
Oh yeah. Like I'm not going to lie. Once finals are done, I'm vegging out on video games. But again, although it is kind of a coping skill, it's not a good one.
No.
And as I get older, I know that I have to mix in other things. I can't do like we're going to do this from sun up till sundown like I used to be able to.
Yeah. Well, so I don't know how the law works in Canada. But apparently the judge had to sign off on the lawsuit before they could move forward.
Nice.
And he ruled that the lawsuit isn't frivolous or manifestly ill-founded. The court concluded that there's a serious issue to be argued, supported by sufficient and specific allegations as to the existence of risks or even dangers arising from the use of Fortnite. And let's clear that up right away, though. Is it Fortnite? Is like the game of Fortnite inherently bad? No. What did Epic Games do? They created a good game.
They did. But like, wouldn't you have to include like the consoles and the tablets and everything else that allows that game to be purchased or be played on their platform?
I mean, I guess. Yeah.
Like, where does it end?
Well, that's what I'm saying is like, I mean, you're suing Epic Games and Fortnite because it's the biggest culprit. And I've seen the stories. I've seen the stories of the kid who like was wearing a diaper or, stopped eating, and because they didn't want to stop playing Fortnite, which, first of all, I have doubts that it was the game that started whatever the problem was.
Oh, yeah.
Like, to me, that denotes that there's a problem that was elsewhere, that it's not that the game was just the catalyst. But yeah, it's like, what have you done but made a good game that kids don't want to stop playing?
So this isn't anything new. Honestly, back when I was in high school, World of Warcraft was that generation's Fortnite. And even South Park made an episode where they mocked kids that would just go down into the basement and when it come out and just played World of Warcraft, or WoW as the kids called it, for months on end. And like, there's ways that you can stop that. Either cold turkey, remove all the electronics and deal with the repercussions for a little bit, but they'll adjust. Or you can set limits and boundaries of like, this is how much time you can invest in it. So like, there is some issue I have with some parents, just because like, I get it. Like, we all have busy days and we all are trying to do things. But if you're trying to make the tablet or the console a parent or a babysitter, it's going to have consequences, whether you want them or not. And so, like, books tend not to have as big of consequences, or negative consequences, I should say, as opposed to the video games.
Yeah, it's interesting. The judge kind of agrees with what we're going back and forth with here, is that, does he believe that Epic Games intentionally made Fortnite addictive? No. The judge said, no, I don't think that. But he added that this does not exclude the possibility that the game is in fact addictive, and that its designer and distributor could have known it, presumed to know it. He's saying he doesn't think that's what happens. He doesn't think that that's a thing, but he's not ruling it out.
Could I sue Mountain Dew? Because that is addictive. And they have to know it by now. I mean, literally, there's a mental health diagnosis of caffeine addiction or caffeine use disorder.
Yeah, I saw a kid over the weekend who's in the intensive care because of too many energy drinks.
And so, again, like, some of it has to be on us.
Yeah, but that rolls back around into the thing we talk about a lot, which is we like to use society and our foundation and structure to try and absolve us of the consequences of our choices. We'll be back. Cody, for what it's worth, Epic Games, the maker of Fortnite,
familiar with it,
they have denied that the lawsuit has any validity. Of course, like, as naturally they would. They have denied the validity of the lawsuit. They said, quote, parents can receive playtime reports that track the amount of time their child plays each week and require parental permission before purchases are made. We plan to fight this in court. We believe the evidence will show that this case is meritless.
I will say that even if they didn't intend for it to be addicting, they sure do, like, get all the sponsored athletes to come over and, like, make special skins and characters and things to continue to promote the game.
Yeah.
Like,
well,
and they're targeting young people in their doing of it.
Let's be really clear, because you've brought up the most annoying part of this as a parent, for me and for someone, a lover of video games. When I was a kid, I loved video games. Now our games were different. Like, listen, I spent a lot of hours playing The Legend of Zelda, the original on the Nintendo.
As one does.
Because we had to figure everything out ourselves. We didn't have like the internet to try and, help us along. So we were just constantly playing it. But it was in the summertime, weekends, like when we had free time. We understood that we couldn't play it all night during school. And I don't remember it being a huge problem among me or my friends. Like, our parents say, hey, you got to turn that off. We'd be like, okay. Like it wasn't, I don't know whether it just wasn't something, there was something weird that's wasn't going on in our heads that is going on in the heads now. I don't understand the concept of why it does seem, because I'm admitting it does seem to be a bigger problem today.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't look at Fortnite and go, oh, those awful, evil people, because listen, I played it. I don't have the urge to play it again.
Yeah. I do think that part of it is that there is a lot more accessibility of electronics versus even when I was growing up, there was still a ton of people that did not have consoles. Tablets weren't a thing yet. And now, I mean...
Yeah. Well...
After I graduated college and had my first youth pastor job, literally I had kids during our children's moment or children's sermon time say, oh yeah, for Christmas, I got a tablet or I got a new iPhone. And they were like second graders.
Well, listen, okay, so this is something that gets harder with the amount of children you have too, because like, look, I have 4 children. They're separated by about 10 years from top to bottom. Okay. And it's hard because the older ones have tablets. They have phones, right? They do have that stuff. And so my 4-year-old is exposed to this far before my other kids might've been exposed to it. Because the older ones are using it. And so it's like, it makes parenting different. You can't have the same rules because I'm just like I don't want to have a morose 4-year-old because the older kids are playing with something he wants to play with. So like, we have to balance this. Like he plays on the tablet some, and you have to balance this somehow. It's like each kid is different. And I don't know. Yeah. It's sort of like a waterfall effect.
Oh yeah.
But to go back to what we started about, it is really annoying, the whole, spending money within the Fortnite game. This annoys me more than anything else with my son, because my son earns money, but then, like we've kind of got control of it in an electronic sense.
Yeah.
Because that's how you do it now. We use a Greenlight, which is a kind of a cool app where the kids get, when they're old enough, they get their own little debit card. But for now,
financial responsibility.
Yeah. I have control of his money, and I say control by just, it's in an electronic, and he's like, hey, I want to buy something on Fortnite. And it always makes me mad because I'm just like, to change the way your character looks, it doesn't have anything to do with the game. Why do you want to buy it? Why do you want to spend money on that? It bothers me.
I want to look like LeBron James with wings.
But it doesn't matter. You don't get any extra special powers.
Nope.
That was my first question. It's like, oh, what do you get? Do you get something that makes you better in the game? No, just changes the way you look.
It looks cool.
That is insanity. I don't like it.
Is this like our golden calf?
I don't know. It's a good question. But then it all goes back into this. Is it the game? Is it the tech? What is it? And if it is the tech, what do you do? Because it's not like we can snap our fingers and get rid of it. We got to figure out a way. We have to figure out a way, because I think there's a larger question here that we are not flourishing as human beings with smartphones, the tablets, the bombardment of technology, but we've also integrated society into it. We can't, we live through these things now.
I will say that my wife and I together decided that we were just going to get rid of social media for at least 30 days.
I noticed you haven't been very upbeat about that.
In which we use social media completely different, my wife and I. Where I guess my equivalent would be if my wife said, Cody, get rid of your Xbox. And I would be like, I pity the fool that thinks I'm getting rid of this. But we've only done it 4 days, and she has commented on the amount of sleep, the better quality of sleep she's getting. She feels less anxious, less stressed. And she just feels better because she's not getting all these messages. She's not feeling the need to comment on everyone's post and to share her beliefs and opinions, or to be worrying about this next big thing or whatever. And yeah, there's definitely something to where we're at, our use of technology. And I really do think that when the Bible talks about having a Sabbath, it is important that we actually do have a real break from things.
Yeah. It's interesting that for some people it's just a bigger deal in your brain. Like the law firm that's bringing the lawsuit against Epic Games said that Epic Games was the same thing as a tobacco manufacturer. They claim the legal responsibility is basically the same.
Okay, so this goes back to me suing Mountain Dew.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And it's weird that so there are certain things I've never had a problem with. Like, and like I've smoked before. I've had a cigarette in my lifetime, but I I had one, didn't like it, moved on. I've had an alcoholic beverage in my lifetime. Not specifically something, I mean, I've had a few, but it wasn't something that was really something I needed in my life.
Oh, yeah.
And I was able to give it up pretty easily and say, yeah, I'm probably never going to do that again when I became a licensed minister, because that was part of, my organization's, things I was going to give up.
Your denomination's strict.
But at the same time, I'm an emotional eater.
Yeah.
Like there are certain things that I do struggle with, and there's some things I don't struggle with. So it's interesting that I think some kids won't struggle with this. You tell them to stop playing Fortnite, they'll be like, okay. But some kids will, and I think there's something to that as well.
Like, could I sue the makers of garlic bread?
It depends how bad it was, I guess. Hey everybody, Dave here. What you have just listened to are bits and pieces of our radio show. We have a radio show on KFEX Firescape Radio located in Chanute, Kansas. You can hear that show from noon to 4 every weekday. So if you want to tune into that, you can go to www.kfex931.com, or you can search KFEX in your app store on your smartphone and find their totally free app there. If you're a fan of Christian music, you might like to listen to our live show when you're at work, or if you're a stay-at-home mom and you like music in the house, you may love to listen to that during the day. So give it a try. We would also direct you to our podcast, Pop Culture Pastor. That's probably why you're listening anyways to this version of what we do. As always, subscribe to the podcast, follow us on our social medias on Facebook and Twitter. It helps us out when you share it, when you review and rate us on our podcast homes. And of course, follow us on social media and share our stuff there. So thank you so much for listening. We love all of you guys so much. We have such a great community of listeners, and we'll see you when the regular pod drops on Friday.